is normally a type of topic that I would be loath to address because I just found that it's not really a lot of profit in wading into political conflicts. But this one, I believe, has to be addressed because of the economic impact associated with it. I think it's just so stark and being ignored. So what am I talking about? The topic that a lot of people are talking about, and it's the gerrymandering that's taking place, and it's being conversed like it's purely a story about racism. And look, definitely racism in the room, but if that's the extent of the diagnosis, we're going to keep losing because you cannot litigate your way out of a structural problem. Here's what the actual data says, and this is why I believe African Americans should be concerned. The black population is growing in raw numbers, right? There's 49 million people as of 2024. But as a share of the political coalition, right, we are being outpaced. Hispanic Americans are now 19% of the country, we're 13. They're spread across Arizona, Nevada, Florida, and Texas. The swing states that decide everything. And we're still handing 90% of our votes to one party with no conditions, no negotiation, no price tag attached. That's not power, that's predictability. And nobody negotiates with a vote that they've already won. It's just common sense, right? It's no need to even argue or debate that. There's no leverage. Now, let's talk about money for a moment, because this is where it starts getting really uncomfortable. $2 trillion in spending power, that's what we bring to the table, and 3.4 of the nation's total wealth. However, we spend like a superpower and we own like a footnote. That 2 trillion number gets quoted like it's strength, but it's not. Wealth is what you own, not what you spend. And the median African American household has about $44,000 in net worth. That's it. The median white household has about $284,000. That's 15% on the dollar in comparison, in other words. That's only 2%. And only 2% of black-owned businesses employ anybody outside the owner's family, right? And we're not even going to have the conversation about how many of those businesses actually make it beyond the first and second generation. That's a problem. You cannot build political infrastructure. You cannot fund campaigns, organize precincts, hold legislators accountable on that peaceable foundation. That's just the reality of the matter. And in the decline of the two-income households, the capital access barriers, the last hired and first fired, employment vulnerability, and what you have is not a map drawn by races alone. You have a map drawn by the math. The political machinery responds to economic weight, and the bottom line is the weight is shifting, and we're not having that conversation. And so, look, I'm not here just to talk about the problems and not offer a solution or perspective in terms of how do we address these issues. Look, the first thing we have to start doing, as far as I'm concerned, right? We have to stop organizing around spending and start organizing around ownership. That's the bottom line. People quote all day long how we have, hundreds of millionaires and billionaires. Okay, cool, that's progress, but that ain't it, right? We have to stop giving political loyalty away for free. There's no other way to say it, right? We build businesses that actually hire, right? That's got to be so important. That circulate our dollars, build collateral, and create economic gravity that makes legislators pay attention. Look, I've always said it. Part of the reason why I'm so gung-ho about entrepreneurship is why I'm such a huge advocate of it. And look, I know entrepreneurship is not going to solve all the problems, all right? But the bottom line is, when you are an entrepreneur, in particular, when you're an employer, look, it's just tough to make smart decisions when your stomach's touching your back and you don't know where your next check is coming from, whether it's 2 months, 2 years, 20 years from now, because of AI and every other societal upheaval. But here's the other thing too: when you're the employer, you're the tag, you're the tail, that is, that wags the dog, right? It's the employers determine whether or not a rec center or a liquor store ends up on the end of your block. It's the employers determine whether or not the grass gets cut or whether or not the trash gets picked up, or whether or not the police arrive in 2 minutes or 20 hours, right? And we have to start to really laser focus in on those issues. The courtroom, of course, matters, but the balance sheet is just as important. And this is why this gerrymandering is taking place. This is why these issues are transpiring, because there's no fear of consequence, right? We are becoming increasingly insignificant politically and economically, not simply because of the complexion of our skin, but because of the math, right? And look, I'm not saying, I already know where this is going to go. I'm not saying prayers don't matter. I'm not saying protests don't matter, but ownership, that is what changes the game. That is how you navigate and play chess as opposed to checkers. That's what really determines what gets mapped and what doesn't. So let's build taller buildings together.